It's a very important anniversary in the history of Manawatu, the Moutoa sluice gates. 50 years ago, they opened for the first time. And here to talk a little bit about this engineering project and environmental protection project as well, we have Alan Cook and Murray Guy, both from Horizons. Welcome, gentlemen, and thanks for talking to Undercurrent. Now, 50 years ago, apparently the scene here was it was quite crowded out here in the countryside on the Shannon-Foxton Highway.
Yes, I understand so. There was a celebration here to open this major structure, and that represented a very significant milestone in the development of this Manawatu floodplain.
So why was it necessary?
Well, one of the first tasks that the Manawatu Catchment Board was faced with when it was constituted back in 1944 was to find a comprehensive way of managing flood control through the Manawatu River from the gorge to the sea. So the engineer of the time, Paul Evans, was charged with conceiving and building a scheme that would achieve that purpose. So Paul worked away and came up with what was to be a very innovative solution to the problem, and to build what was one of the largest flood control schemes in New Zealand and arguably one of the most successful. The floodgate structure itself here was itself a very significant engineering feat, and indeed it has been recognised as such by the Institute of Professional Engineers, who in 1990, at the time of commemorating 150 years of engineering in New Zealand, recognised this particular structure. It was chosen as one of 68 major engineering works in New Zealand at that time that had substantially contributed to New Zealand's engineering heritage and to its prosperity.
Now, you could argue that these gates at Moutoa are quite a significant way from the city. What led them to be built here?
They're built here because there is a change of gradient in the river, essentially, and the flatter a river, the lower the flow velocity, and therefore the less flood flow that it can convey. So the river from this point downstream for the next 30 kilometres or so is very flat and is unable to convey the full 100-year design flood flow. So without these works, the flood flows would, and in fact did, prior to this work being undertaken, leave the river system at this point and flood it in an uncontrolled manner over a vast area of land downstream of here. In fact, approximately 90 square kilometres of land was subject to uncontrolled flooding. And worse than that, a lot of that 90 square kilometres comprises low basins, and once floodwaters gets into those basins, it takes up to weeks to get out via comprehensive drainage and pumping systems back into the river. So the impact of that uncontrolled flooding on the production of this land downstream from here is huge, or was huge, and has been overcome with the construction of these works.
Because you may not think to look at it today, it's flowing in a nice, orderly fashion, but she can be quite a wild, unpredictable piece of water, can't she?
It certainly can.
So, Murray, what part do the Moutoa sluice gates play in the overall flood protection scheme for the region?
Well, they're an integral part of our Lower Manawatu scheme, and they are the control plug, if you like, and they do regulate the level of the river down here, which provides relief for the tributaries, and it provides relief for the drainage schemes. So we have something like 32,000 hectares that are benefiting from this scheme in the Lower Manawatu, and that's from the gorge to Fielding and down to the coast. And of that 32,000 hectares, there's about 9,000 hectares that is in this area here, which is the Makarua Basin, the Moutoa Basin, and the Koparua Basin. So that's the 9,000 hectares that Alan would have talked about earlier in terms of the direct benefit down here from these gates.
So, how do they work and who decides when they work?
Right, so we have some sophisticated flood prediction and flood warning technology, and we get ample warning of a river flow that will necessitate the opening of the gates. Once we receive that prediction, then we take steps to have the floodway evacuated, because in normal times the floodway is intensively farmed, and it is only when there is the prospect of opening the gates that stock and temporary fencing are removed. So we give those warnings and the floodway is cleared, and then at a predetermined level decision is made to open the gates. Now there's quite a bit of skill involved in knowing exactly when to open them, how quickly to open them, and how much to open them, and again when to close and how quickly to close. And we have a number of computer modelling tools that assist us in making those decisions. But it is important that the gates are opened in accordance with some strict operation criteria.
So when they are opened, what then happens?
We open the gates very slowly initially, and that's deliberate. We don't want to cause a sudden change in the river level upstream of the gates, so they're opened very slowly, and we progressively open more gates to maintain the river level upstream of the gates at within what we call an operating range, a range of about 1.25 metres. So we manipulate the gates over a period of sometimes 12 hours, sometimes 24 hours, or even more, to control the level upstream of the gates within that range. So the water that we release into the floodway is a maximum of 2,500 cubic metres per second is the design flow that we send down the floodway, then finds its way back into the river at Whirikiino, 10 kilometres down the floodway, and meets with the main channel flow that takes 30 kilometres to get to the same point from here.
So when we were talking earlier, you described it as a bit like the back of a capital D.
Yes, that's a good analogy. That the straight, the back of the D is the floodway. That's the efficient way of conveying flow from here to Whirikiino, and the other part of the D, the rounded part of the D, is the meandering 30-kilometre section of main river channel.
So when were these gates last opened in action?
The last opening here was in July 2011, and that was the 39th, I believe, opening of the gates since their construction. So on average, the gates, if you do the arithmetic, have been opened once every 15 months. But there have been extended dry periods where we've gone as long as 4 to 5 years without the need to open the gates. At the other end of the continuum, in 2004, we established a record by opening the gates 6 times in that 1 year.
2004, a watershed moment in Manawatu's history, and obviously the gates played a big part in the protection not only of the surrounding farmland but also of Palmerston North City itself.
Absolutely, it was the greatest test that the scheme and the floodgate structure has been put to. In fact, the flood in that event exceeded the design of the scheme.
Right, so it passed with flying colours, I take it.
No, I wouldn't say that. I don't think everyone would agree that it passed with flying colours. The scheme certainly reduced the flooding that would have otherwise happened by a very substantial amount, but there were some failures, some breaches in the system, because, as I said, that event exceeded the design of the scheme's design.
Which means that there has to be some considerations given for the future development of the sluiceway?
Absolutely. What we learnt a lot in that flood event, and as a consequence of that event, the council has embarked on a very substantial scheme upgrade project, a $40 million rural flood protection upgrade project. But I must say that there is no need to upgrade the floodgate structure or the floodway itself. They essentially will remain in their original to the original design.
Now that's a testament to Mr. Evans and the team that put the whole thing together.
Absolutely, I think a lot would say that he was an engineer ahead of his time who came up with a very innovative solution to a major problem.
So, 2004 floods put the acid on the system. What subsequent improvements or developments did you think needed to be put in place in order to cope with a similar event?
Well, there's so much that we learned from 2004. In Palmerston North, we had good protection. We had protection that was there that covered that event, but it also gave us a wake-up call and made us realise that we needed to give further protection to Palmerston North. So, consequent to 2004, we have done a 500-year flood protection upgrade for the city to protect the city. And in the rural sector, we are upgrading to a full 100-year protection. Now, what 2004 taught us in the rural sector was that the flood was variable over that Lower Moutoa scheme, and in one of the tributaries, which was the Arua, we had a 250-year event, and that created a lot of damage. And we realised then that our flood protection was not up to standard, and so we've gone out on a $40 million upgrade, particularly for the Arua and also for parts of the Moutoa, and that's going to give a lot more certainty and a lot more surety to those people who are earning a living out of farming and cropping those Class 1 and Class 2 soils, which total an area of 13,000 hectares.
So $40 million is a lot of money. What are Horizon's ratepayers getting for their bucks?
Well, the Horizon's ratepayers are paying the lion's share of that. The direct benefit area, that's the people who have the direct benefit, that's those that are out there on the land or in the towns, are paying 80%, and the other 20% comes from the general rate, which is spread across the whole region. So we have buy-in from the rural community. They have asked for this level of protection. They did have an option of having it down to a lesser level of 50-year, but they've opted for that higher level. And we've also made some major changes to the town of Fielding. Fielding was badly affected by the 04 flood. We had the Marquino stream which runs through the middle of it, and it did a lot of damage, and so we've now got a new scheme there whereby we only allow 50 cubic metres maximum to go through the town, and the balance goes cross-country and goes into the Kiwatia stream, which bypasses the actual township. So we've done a great job, I believe, there for the future of that rural town, which is quite a service centre for this region.
Alan, tell me about the significance of the numbers that are on the sluice gates.
Right, if we look at the yellow and black, what we call staff gauge there, we endeavour to maintain the water level between the 7 and 8.25 metre marks. So nothing happens until the river reaches the 7 metre mark. We wouldn't open the gates. Between there and 8.25 is where we try and maintain the river level, and if the river level got up above the 9 metre mark, it would be over the top of the gates.
And what about the black and white numbers?
Right, they're used as a tool by the gate openers to determine how much each gate is open at any one time.
So he controls it from the control tower that's just on the bank above us?
Absolutely. Once the gate opening is predicted, then we man this the structure here, and we have people on here 24 hours of the day on a shift basis until the event is passed and the gates are closed.
And do the gates open up or down?
All right, the large steel gates that you can see with the black and white numbers on them are what we call radial gates, and they lift up. So the gates are operated by a system of pulleys and ropes, and are actually lifted with relatively small electric motors through that gearing. It takes 40 minutes, in fact, to fully open one of the gates.
How heavy are the gates?
Each of the gates weighs about 15 tonnes.
Now, we've mentioned the engineer who designed the system. What about the people who put it together?
All right, the gates structure was built over a 3-year period between 1959 and 1962 by a company by the name of Wilkins and Davies, who were a very big national civil construction company at the time. The contract price was £600,000, and if we convert that to today's dollars, that equates to around $22 to $23 million. So clearly it was a very big civil project of its time.